sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
Good morning. My name is Linda Leibel, and I serve as president of the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spartanburg this year. Thanks for joining us this morning. In cooperation with the public health authorities, we've suspended all regular in-person church activities for the time being. As the pandemic continues, we understand that there's a desire to find ways to meet in person. We are a congregation and we must work together, as our highest goal is our care for one another. If you desire access to the church building or the grounds for any meeting, please contact the church office so that the board can vet your request to help you find the best and safest way to proceed in coordinating with the whole congregation. Allow me to share a few announcements. We're organizing donations for flowers for each Sunday for the service this fall. This is a wonderful way for us to connect to this space and to this congregation that we love. Today's flowers are given by Stacy Jackson in honor of all woodland creatures. You can also be part of the celebration of life together and beautifying the church on Sundays. See the happenings for details if you're interested. The Social Justice Quintuple Dip has been rescheduled from this Sunday to next Sunday, the 18th, from 3 to 5 p.m. This Tuesday's dip on October 13th is still going to be held from 10 to noon. We'd like you to donate your native wildflowers for planting on the church grounds. Donate winter wear, new or lightly used coats, jackets, scarves, hats, gloves, and new socks for men, women, and children. Donate to Total Ministries. What they need right now is hygiene items, toilet paper and paper towels, peanut butter, canned fruit, canned veggies, pasta sauce, and macaroni and cheese. And bring your stash of old newspapers for Animal Allies. And buy those beautiful Grimke mural cards from the League of Women Voters. Every time I drive up, it's so wonderful to see that. Especially in times like these, we need to help each other. Thanks for being part of our congregation today. We are a people of faith and hope. Welcome.
Good morning. Rabbit tobacco, camphor weed, purple lovegrass, cone flower, purple top tridents, scuppernong vines. This morning, a woman in this congregation entered into this sanctuary bearing the beautiful flowers that you see before you. These that I've named and many more. Flowers that are gathered from the beauty of the earth and that now adorn this sanctuary to remind us of the goodness of this world. Early this morning, when it was still pouring rain, another woman, a young girl that I know, put on her boots and her rain jacket and went out into the herb garden to visit with the animals and to pick the mint, to smell the beautiful fragrance of the earth. There is a deep goodness in the world. And even when shadow and darkness and fear threaten to overwhelm, the goodness surges back. We gather today in celebration of that goodness and in protection of it, to fight for it. I want to remind you, as we have every Sunday since this summer, but the things that you can do this election season to provide for our democracy, to secure your vote, and to fight for the goodness of the world, a goodness as diverse as the wildflowers in front of us, as beautiful as the fall, even in the rain. Pay attention. What is our government doing to make it easier or harder for people to vote during the pandemic? This seems to change every week. Pay attention. Talk about voting with someone different every day until the election on November 3rd. Be a voice that is stronger and more human, more humane than any voice in the media. Implore your fellow citizens to vote. Get out your calendar, mark the day when you will vote, and make time on that day for voting to be your priority, no matter how long it takes. We have already seen long lines. We have already seen voter suppression and obstruction. Make your plan and provide all the time possibly needed to execute that plan on the day that you have chosen. Follow the instructions carefully when you vote. Make it easy for the person counting your vote to count your vote correctly. Give no one the opportunity to discount your electoral power. There are many who would. Do not give them the chance. Vote early. Everyone in the state of South Carolina has the right to vote early this year because of the pandemic. Vote early. And finally, have patience. Decide now that you will be patient for the results to come in. We know that there will be assaults on the truth, as there are every day. We know that there is a shadow that will try to manipulate our feelings and drive us to fear and despair, as that shadow tries to do every day. It will take days and perhaps weeks for the full vote to count to come in. Stay focused on the facts. Hold to the truth no matter what messaging is sent our way. And be patient. There is a deep goodness in this world, a goodness all around us, a goodness just under our feet and welling up in our own bodies. And this is a congregation committed to that goodness, that celebrates it and loves it and fights to protect it. Thank you for joining us in that fight today. Welcome.
Good morning. I will be reading from The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, The Tyrant Monster. The figure of the tyrant monster is known to the mythologies, folk traditions, legends, and even nightmares of the world. And his characteristics are everywhere essentially the same. The inflated ego of the tyrant is a curse to himself and his world. No matter how his affairs may seem to prosper, self-terrorized, fear-haunted, alert at every hand, to meet the battle back the anticipated aggressions of his environment, which are primarily the reflections of the uncontrollable impulses to acquisition within himself. The giant of self-achieved independence is the world's messenger of disaster, even though, in his mind, he may entertain himself with the humane intentions. Wherever he sets his hand, there is a cry, if not from the housetops, then more miserably within every heart, a cry to liberate the land.
From the crush of wealth and power, something broken in us all waits the Spirit's silent hour, pleading with a poignant call. Bind all my wounds again. Even now our hearts are weary of the friend we need so much. When I see the pain you carry, shall I with a gentle touch bind all your wounds again? When our love for one another makes our burdens light to bear, find the sister and the brother hungry for the feast we share. Bind all their wounds again. Every time our spirits languish, terrified to draw too near, may we know each other's anguish, and with love that casts out fear, bind all our wounds again.
Our church does not follow a creed. Instead, we follow a covenant, a promise that we created together as a congregation, and a promise that we renew each week with one another. It is not a promise made lightly. It is a promise we hold dear to our hearts as we allow it to guide us as a community and as individuals. It is printed in the order of service linked to this stream service. Please join me as we read the words and renew our commitment to these principles. We are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves, to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. We have a tradition that means a great deal to many of us. When we are able to gather together, we journey to our rippling bowl and place a stone or shell in the water. These stones and shells symbolize our joys and sorrows, and we place them in the water as a way to symbolically give them into the care of our community, so we can be held in the strong bonds of love and belonging that are the foundation of our congregation. We greet one another. In these actions, we affirm that in no circumstance are we ever truly alone. Even though we cannot be together in person, we can still take this opportunity to feel the living, breathing heart of this place and the hearts of the community that make this place a spiritual home, and turn our joys and concerns over still through our intentions and our imaginations, always remembering that our bonds hold just as strong, that they continue to surround and support us even when we are apart. Allow yourself to feel the connections, the warmth and the love that radiates to and from each of us, to and from each of us. And please reach out whenever and however you can to one another and support everyone as we go through this time.
Mary's words summon us to care for one another, to activate the connections that are between us so that we know one another's care. We build a network of support that can sustain us through these very difficult times that we all are living. Today for our offertory, we want to further activate those connections in support not only for one another, but for people across our nation, for our world, for our planet. Hurricanes, double hurricanes over the same townships and parishes in a single hurricane season. Wildfires consuming millions of acres. The subsequent air polluted that our fellow citizens breathe, in a pandemic that affects us all. We are living in times that defy description, times that cause our imaginations to race, that cause our language to stumble, times that can cause us nightmares and to wake to what seems like living nightmares. But there is action we can take to cut through that fear, to transform our anxiety into energy, to care for our fellow citizens and for our world. No matter what the adversity, there's action that we can take to activate these connections and to help. This month, we share the plate on behalf of the UUA's Disaster Relief Fund. This is a fund that is used to serve our fellow citizens and, in times of crisis, ourselves, wherever disaster strikes in our nation. If you go to our website, uucs.org, and scroll beneath this live stream, you will see a button that says Help. Click on that button and you will see many, many ways that you can be of service during this pandemic, during this election season, during this time of crisis in our country. And at the bottom, you will see ways to give. We share the plate in order to create the resources that can be deployed wherever there is need, so that even for those that we do not know, even places that we may never have been and may never go, where there is need, we can help. We have a power to cut through the fear, to transform the anxiety into energy. Let us bring our gifts. Mary read to us a passage from Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Joseph Campbell, the great scholar of comparative mythology. In the year 1949, a year of poignancy in the writing of the book, Campbell spoke about the ego inflation and narcissistic violence of the tyrant. Our second reading today is The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus, a poem inscribed on the Statue of Liberty. Another giant, a colossus, mythological in scale, but the opposite of tyrannical. Listen to these words in counterpoint to Campbell's description of the tyrant narcissist. The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Let us join together in silence. democracy. I was reminded this week of an event that took place a few years ago in this sanctuary. It's very pleasant to be at this point in the life of this congregation that I can remember back to things that have happened here a few years ago. That wasn't the case previously. I'm very grateful to have built those memories with you and to be able to cast back in the mind to these kinds of circumstances, the ways that they unfold and what they mean for us. So on a Wednesday night in the fall, when the evenings had become already very dark, a night of bad weather as we have seen in these last days, a Wednesday night when a group of us had gathered in this sanctuary for a time of meditation, long before the pandemic was ever an idea in our minds and ever a part of our daily practice. Small group that gathered every week for meditation, to sit in silence, to share in music and reflection with each other. And in the dark of those autumn nights, the skylight in the sanctuary was illuminated, casting a light around the exterior of the building, showing above the treetops the location of this sanctuary. And as we gathered for meditation, to share in silence, to be together, to fellowship with one another in that way, a person came through the doors. A young woman. She was clearly distressed, tear-stained face. She came in timidly, found a place in the circle, and sat down. As happens in these gatherings, although we were observing silence, many of the people who were there reached out a hand, touched her shoulder, shared with her a welcoming glance across our small circle, just letting her know that this was a place where she was welcome and that there was concern for whatever it was that she was experiencing. For an hour, we shared that space. A place of warmth and light, a place of comfort against the darkness of the night. And when our time together ended, we spoke with her, and we learned that she was seeking refuge. There was a relationship in her life that had turned destructive, and she was living under threat. And so we listened to her and talked with her, offered her resources, physical and emotional, connective to the surrounding community, to help her know that she was not alone, that there were ways in which she could get help. We listened to what she wanted, and we helped her access those things. At the end of the night, she went away equipped with things that she could use, connections that she could activate in order to keep herself safe, in order to find her way forward out of the darkness that had surrounded her. That is the work of this congregation, just to care for one another and for our community. And the story itself is a simple story, a story that could be told by many congregations across this country and around this world throughout time. But it stands out in my mind like a light, like a lamp. And it came back to me just in the last weeks. A voice from the past speaking gratitude to this congregation for what we did in that moment, on that night, and for the pivot that took place, the transformation that was wrought in the connection, in the refuge, in the sharing of resources of many kinds, the change that happened in that instant. What created the circumstances that could be the case? What created this beautiful sanctuary so that with the coming of that visitor, it was truly a sanctuary? This did not emerge out of nothing. And this was not created by one person. The physical building of this church, the skylight above the sanctuary, the lights that are wired in it, and even more than all of that, the culture that we cultivate here, the culture of care and service that was active that night and many, many, many nights since. All of that is the work of us together. People talking with each other, thinking about the world, about what is needed in the world, about what can be beautiful and meaningful in a world so often full of fear and violence and anxiety and despair. What the value would be in building a sanctuary as beautiful and welcoming and warm as this, and what it takes to be sure that we are a people who steward this sanctuary well, that we are a people of warmth and welcome, true to the physical bearing of this sanctuary. What it takes for us to be authentic and real, a congregation worthy of a space like this. It's not the work of one person. It is the work of all of us and generations of us, sharing our resources, both physical and invisible, but very real, to create a space and a culture of sanctuary for every one of us, and for those of us that we do not even know, but who see the light and who come. And that is the work of democracy. The work of democracy, both in our process and in our purpose, is to recognize the power and the voice, the unconditional importance of every single one of us. What happened that night in this sanctuary was the expression and fulfillment of the practice of democracy in this congregation. That together we had decided to create a space and to fill it with meaning and life, so that when that guest entered our halls, she illuminated within us the very purpose to which we had set ourselves. She ignited us to be who we claim we should be. Her voice and presence, her power no less than any of the rest of us. And all of that power combined and shared to create a place of deep goodness in the world. When we do the work of democracy, when we do the hard work of listening to each other, of calling forth from one another our power, of slowing down to listen and to think, to disagree, to work on compromise, and to find our way forward. When we do that sometimes excruciating and frustrating work, we are fusing our power. We are combining our resources. And we are doing it so that our purpose is clear, to make a world more livable for everyone. That is what democracy is about. It's not just about representation. That is a means to an end. It's not just about votes and votes counting and votes not being suppressed, as crucial and essential as those things are, and don't mishear me, they are absolutely crucial. Every voice must count. The purpose is so that the value and worth of every person can stand up in the world and thrive. We hear that in the poem of Emma Lazarus. That those lives that have been discarded by other histories, by other governments, that those lives are seen as having absolute value here. And not only belong here, but are invited here. That this nation is a place of sanctuary. This is what it is intended to be. And it is the work of democracy that creates that summons us all to that, and that secures it. That is the work of this congregation. This is the work of our communities. This is the work of our nation. And you know, as I know, that work is threatened. There is a shadow that is growing, a shadow that invades our minds. I have sat with many people this week on the telephone, over Zoom, even at a distance in person, sitting and listening to the growing fear of the shadow that is trying to take possession of our democracy. It is invasive and it is greedy. It is not only in one person's hands, and it is not new. The shadow of our democracy is old, and there have been many points in our nation's history that it has overwhelmed us. If our light is a light of refuge and sanctuary, a light of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, a light of shared process, of listening and calling forth voice and power from every person, of slowing down process to be sure that every person is included, then the shadow is the shadow of tyranny and injustice, a shadow that would suppress voice and use violence to intimidate and destroy, a shadow that seeks its own way over that of others, a shadow of oppression. We do not need to fool ourselves. On two counts, we need to be very clear about the truth of this shadow. The first is that it is not new. When we say that we are surprised by what is happening in our country, we are ignoring the truth of our shadow. We need to see it for what it is, for the very fact that seeing it prevents us from being beholden to it. When we face the truth of what has happened in this country over 500 years, from before this country was even its own legal entity, when we see that truth for what it is, we empower ourselves with the light of truth to see the shadow and dispel it. And we must see also how the shadow lives within us. How often have you, as I have, just wanted to have my own way? Just wanted to speak what I wanted and have everyone else fall in line. Just wanted for the voice opposite mine, that disagreed with mine, that was difficult for me to hear and to understand, just wanted it to be silenced. How often, for you as for me, has your anger reached such a pitch that you felt a surge of violence come up within you? Even when we are able to check that, even when we have the discipline to control it, we need to see that the shadow of domination, the shadow of ego, the shadow of injustice and violence and tyranny, it is not separate from us. It lives also within us. When we see the shadow of our nation's history, the shadow of our democracy, and that shadow is not only a shadow of those who we would deem enemies, but our own shadow too. Compulsions and obsessions, defensiveness and insecurity, and ego drive that is all a part of our own being. When we see these things, we are able to avoid dehumanizing those against whom we fight ourselves, which we must do at all costs. We cannot dehumanize those against whom we strive. That is the shadow. And we are able to take the measure of our country in order to shine a light of truth and justice on it, to make it a place of real sanctuary and refuge. Finally, after all these years. We must do this work every day. Every day. In the smallest parts of our lives, we must do the work of democracy every day. When we feel our tempers flare, when we feel the desire to dominate, when we just want to shut out the other's voice, when the desire to force our way takes hold, we must stop to do the work of democracy in process and in purpose, to listen, to pay attention, to empower the other, to wrestle with each other to make decisions, so that we create a more livable world for us all. If we allow ourselves in the smallest parts of our life to fall into the shadow of domination and oppression, it will overwhelm us. It will take hold, and we will not succeed in dispelling it. Every day, we do the work of democracy. Me calling forth your power, and you calling forth my power. Shared power, and discovering that when you speak out of the fullness of your being, and I speak out of the fullness of my being, neither of us are diminished, but we rise up together in abundance and find resources and ways forward, possibilities that we never knew before, so much greater than the shadow of scarcity, so much greater than the shadow of oppression, so much greater than one side pushing to overwhelm and dominate the other. When we struggle to live together with authenticity and care, we create a life together that none of us could make on our own. And see what it creates. Think of this place that you love, this sanctuary. Think of what you have created here over years and decades and generations. A place of wrestling, of process, of thinking, of arguing, of disagreeing, and of finding a way forward together that fuses resources and creates a place of refuge that saves lives. A place of light that pierces the darkness. Darkness of the world, darkness of our minds, darkness of our relationships. A place that dispels the shadow and welcomes us into warmth and fellowship and light, where we can pivot and find new life, abundance. That happened here on that night now years ago. And you know, as I do, that it has happened many times before and many times since. At the borders of our nation, a woman stands raising a light with the power to dispel the darkness, a light of refuge and welcome for all people, for ourselves and our ancestors too. There is a shadow not only outside of our borders, but most of all within it, within our democracy, within our history, within ourselves. We must raise the light. We must raise the light in process and in purpose. Every day, to summon from one another our power, to listen to one another exactly when we don't want to talk with each other, to disagree with each other, to work together the work of democracy on the smallest level of our lives to the very largest, for the purpose that this become once again and finally a place of sanctuary and refuge for all. And if we can do it here, if we can create that here, then we can create that for our nation and for our world. Every day. Share power. And we will dispel the shadow.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all the new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed, sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Every day, on the smallest level of our lives to the very greatest, do the work of democracy. Most of all, when you do not want to, when what you want is to overwhelm, to just have your way, to bulldoze and push over. When that shadow rises in you, as I know it rises in me, do the work of democracy. Every day. And we will become the light that dispels the darkness.